Idaho.
Really? Say that
Yeah,
again.
and I will tell you that in fact, well, actually, most of the Mormons that I'm associated with out there are ex-Mormons, but they are and they're very religious. They've expressed an interest in Hebrew roots type things. The ones that I know haven't. They got their own concepts and slants on it, not because of the different things that I'm into, but anyway, I highly respect the Mormons that I'm acquainted with. I will tell you that they are very much community oriented people.
Sure.
Hi, Ann. Good to see you. Oh, and I think Lydia sent you an email tonight, so you could check your emails on that. But yeah.
Well, I have read the Book of Mormon, I'll bet 6 to 10 times.
Wow.
And I really don't find anything in there that is unseemly, except it's pretty obvious that it's a fiction, but it's got to be the greatest Christian fiction that has ever been written. Honestly, it's exciting.
I'd agree with that. I've read some of the books here and there, but it's been a long time. Yeah.
That's a funny thing too, because I was challenged one time to find anything in the Book of Mormon that was against polygamy. And in the book of Jacob, I did find something that completely prohibited any kind of polygamy. And that was the end of my friendship with that guy, because I think he had 3 wives.
Oh, wow.
Like that.
And so if you're going to be a priest or a bishop in the Mormon church, you could still have multiple wives?
You could, yeah. Well, I don't think so. Not in the above ground Mormon church. I think underground, probably. I know a lot of them out there. There are a lot of Mormon groups that are not associated with the Reconstruction movement or the other Mormon movements that maintain small groups, could say family groups with lots and lots of offspring. And some of their practices, as far as I'm concerned, are pretty heinous in regards to them pretty much raising their daughters to go into these illicit marriages with much older men.
Oh,
at least that's what my reading. I don't want to say that is a smear on Mormonism, because it's not. It's like any group that will go outside the religious doctrines of their group are no longer really affiliated with them anymore.
All right. So Marcel is here.
Marcel is here.
All right.
What do you have to say, Marcel? Anything tonight? Do you have a scripture or a prayer or a wish or a dream?
No, I'm just listening.
Just listening tonight. Who else is here? And tonight's cook, I think Nephi, I think that's Finney, right?
Oh, is that Finney?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, wow.
How's it going down there in Haiti? Are you able to speak? Probably not. He's going.
Oh, there he is. He's coming on.
Oh. Hello.
Oh, yeah, is it Brother Finney?
Yeah. Is it okay?
Yeah, Brother Finney is there.
Can I call you
speak?
Finney? Do you go by Finney?
Yeah. Can I talk? Do you?
Oh yeah. Go ahead. We're calling on you.
Okay. It's always a pleasure for me to. Yeah. Do you hear me? Can I talk now?
Yes. We.
Oui. Oui, oui, monsieur.
Shalom, shalom, shalom to all of you. I know this night it's a special meeting. I just want to take part just to learn about some scriptures, and also a pleasure for me to hear when I'm listening. It's a way for me to learn. When I learn, it's a possibility for me to share what I learn with others.
Good. Then you can turn in your Bible to Daniel chapter 6. We're studying the other Jewish revolt. This is the fourth session, that is the Maccabean revolt. And we're looking at it from the perspective of three biblical books, two of which most people are not really aware of. Those three books that tell us something about this revolt in about 165 BC is the book of Daniel and Apocalypse, and then two books that are historical, that is Second Maccabees covers some of it, and First Maccabees covers a lot of it. From a perspective of the Maccabees, First Maccabee of the Maccabees, the other two go into other details of it. But in Daniel, the whole thing is an apocalyptic, what would I call it? It is encrypted language. It's encrypted for the same reason apocalypses are encrypted, and that is so that the enemy during times of war will not be able to read or understand what the testimony is about.
Right.
Daniel is an apocalypse, is being written in the time of the Maccabees in the 160s BC, but he purports to be writing 400 years earlier. Again, in part to purloin his writing so that he can't be understood by Gentiles, but also to go back to a time that was similar in the history of Israel and try to bring forth some of the lessons to be learned that can be applied to the current events of his day, which we talked about last week, probably more of a civil war than a real revolt, because Israel wasn't really completely under the thumb of Greece, or really the Seleucid Empire to the east. But there are many factions of Jews there, just as there are denominations today. And some of those didn't see the way clear to support the Maccabees, because as it turns out, when they took the reins of power, they turned out to be pretty brutal and very much renovative. They wanted to and did renew Judaism to quite an extent, including to do away with the Zadokite priesthood, which, if according to Ezekiel 40 through 44, was something they dare not do, that Yahweh had put the Zadokites in charge of liturgy and temple and calendar for all generations. And so during that time, in 171, a little earlier on, the Zadokites were castigated and cast out of the temple government. And even the last Zadokite high priest, that is Onias III, was murdered. And you might remember that his son, Onias IV, went into exile, went to Egypt, to Heliopolis, and he talked to Ptolemy Philopater, I think it was Philopater, who was the king of Egypt and an enemy of the other Greeks, and asked, will you help us build a temple? Here, look, he said, look at Isaiah chapter 19, where it says the great house would be built in the city of the sun. And he says, Ptolemy, what else would be the city of the sun but Heliopolis, which means the city of the sun? So the King Ptolemy of Egypt said, yes, I will help you. And they built a house of Yahweh in Heliopolis, outside of what we call today Cairo. I'm already losing my voice. That stood for 250 years. The Romans destroyed that about the same time they destroyed the Jerusalem temple. But a very interesting thing, in the Onion temple in Heliopolis, they didn't have a gold menorah. What they had was a golden giant sun disk in its place. Not that they were sun worshipers, but you know, from the time of Akhenaten on, the sun disk had a special meaning in monogamy. And when that revolting Pharaoh Akhenaten came on in about 1350 BC, instead of worshiping the gods of Egypt, he brought to the fore one God, whom he called the Aten, the sun disk. Not that they worshiped the sun, but they saw the sun as a symbol of the eternal life of the deity. So where in the world did Akhenaten get 50,000 monogamists to come down and build this new city for the temple in 1350 that he was building, the Amarna temple? He had to go to the only monogamous in Egypt. That was the Hebrews. And so there was an exodus when that city and temple was broken up by the priestly class who wanted to go back to polygamy. And the Jews had a different exodus at that time. There was a southern exodus that knew nothing about Goshen and Moses, and the exodus in which the Red Sea was become dry land. They knew nothing about that. And the ones who crossed the Red Sea knew nothing about the one that was south and scattered the 50,000 monotheists who were under Akhenaten's reign in Akhetaten. They knew nothing about their exodus either. And they ended up all over the place, and even back in Jerusalem, where they came to meet those of the Goshen exodus. Does that make any sense?
So I want to make sure I understand you. So there was an exodus that went south into Ethiopia area?
Yes. Actually, Akhenaten left the city of Ra and moved down to central to south Egypt and built a city. And he brought with him 50,000 people to worship with him, the new Elohim, which was Aten.
Okay, so, and this was approximately when?
1350, about the same time as the Exodus from
You're
Goshen.
kidding. Wow. I didn't know about this.
Well, they ended up in Elephantine, Egypt, and in Yeb, and as far east as Jebus. If you've ever heard of the Jebusite hypothesis.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's just an incredible story that we really don't have history for that second Exodus, but it's extremely intriguing to find out how all these monotheists, and we might say Jews, ended up in Ethiopia, all parts of Africa, African tribes that are still following a Jewish way. I'm reading a book on it right now, especially the Lemba tribe. And I think that's in Zimbabwe. And many more tribes have a lot of carryovers from either Akhenatenism or Judaism.
Now, that's not, is that Steve Collins' work or no?
No, what I'm reading is I saw, let's see, let me go get the book. It's just in the other room.
Okay. So, Ann, do you know much about this? Has Jackson talked much about that before?
Ann and I, we only talk about food.
Oh.
This is called The Lost Ark of the Covenant.
A study on that, actually, I think a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay.
This is called The Lost Ark of the Covenant. Okay. Maybe I can get it up here on the screen.
The Covenant. And you mentioned Isaiah what chapter?
19. The end of 19.
Okay.
Wait a minute here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to fix this or not. I got a blurry background. Maybe I can. Mm-hmm. Let's see, virtual video filter, virtual backgrounds, none. That didn't work. Okay. Virtual backgrounds. Is this backwards?
No, The Lost Ark of the Covenant. Okay.
This is a good book.
Do you sell that is that in your store?
Well, I will sell it when I'm done, but I read about this. Somebody in the think tank said, you ought to get this book. It is really good. It's very much like a fast-moving novel. The author, Tudor Parfitt, Parfitt. It's his job, he thinks, divine mission to solve the 2,500-year-old mystery of the fabled biblical ark. So he went out to live with the tribes in Ethiopia, not in Addis Ababa, but way, way out there in the country where nobody wears clothes and they're probably still cannibals. He went way out there to visit these tribes and see what kind of practices that were holdovers from Judaism, and to look into the Church of Mary of Zion to try to see if that ark was there. Is that the name of the church? Let me see, participants. I was looking for Bryant, but he's not here tonight. He would know, he knows everything. But I'm really off the subject, but this is such an interesting area. Egypt, Jews, Hebrews. Well, hello, Sean. Oh, yeah, great, great. We want to report.
Oh, he went to the funeral, right?
Yeah. That's really a great thing that you did, Sean. And I hope that Yahweh's been with you all this time and that you have plenty of opportunities to be a comfort. I know that you have a soft, soft heart. Amen. All right, so let's go to Daniel 6. There's still some carryovers in 135 BC from what happened in the time of Melchizedek, of Abraham, of Moses, of Akhenaten, carrying over into the Onion temple because of the evidence of the sun disk there. So some of the Zadokite priests, the main body went to Egypt, the other body went to Syria, to wilderness camps, including one priest, the teacher of righteousness, whom we're still not sure who that was. Let me get over to my notes. And now we're going to read into the last of the conflicts of Daniel in the first half of the book of Daniel. This is chapter 6. After chapter 6, we get into the visions, and that's when it really gets interesting. 6:1. Do you want the scripture up here so you can see it or not? Does it make any difference? I'll put it up here just for fun. It pleased Darius. Now, Darius is part of a new administration over Persia, over Media, over Parthia, over the Seleucid dynasty, which I've already talked all about that in previous versions. Darius is not registered Greek. He's a Persian. So as the end of Nebuchadnezzar's reign was prophesied by dreams and visions in the first part of Daniel, so happened to Antiochus Epiphanes, the one that was pestering the Hebrews in the second century, mid-second century BC. And now that administration is gone. So we're going to expect to see, when we go again from the 5th or 6th century BC back to the 2nd century, we're going to see something that happened that was very similar to what we're reading now. Darius, he set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom. A satrap is a kind of semi-independent governor. And over them 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other presidents and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the presidents and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regards to the kingdom. But they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful and no error or fault was found in him. So from the house of Nebuchadnezzar, the Median dynasty takes over much of Babylonia, and our boys find themselves in favor with the new government, with Daniel set as one of the 3 presidents who were over the 120 governors, semi-autonomous governors. And in verse 5, then these men said, we shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his Elohim. That's grasping at straws. But Daniel was, after all, a foreigner, and that would be a particular area that you could find fault with him, because he's living now in a place of a great polygamy, where even the king, the emperor, the satraps are all worshipped as well. You can remember an earlier vision of Nebuchadnezzar, that is the great statue where Nebuchadnezzar was the gold head. We're getting down here to the feet that are of iron and clay mixed. It's not something that's going to stay together real well when this whole thing is over. There's no other way to get Daniel except in his foreign religion. That was his Achilles heel, if he had any at all. And verse 6, then these presidents and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, O King Darius, live forever. All the presidents of the kingdom, the prefects and satraps, the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an interdict that whoever makes petition to any Elohim or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. I think everybody has some kind of propensity to want to be esteemed or want to be famous, or in some cases, want to be worshiped. And certainly this would appeal to somebody that already had all power in the nation. Of course, there's never been a time when it hasn't been like that. And we have seen this in the last couple of presidents, President Trump and Biden. They seem to want to dictate and they want to be praised. And they talk about themselves all the time. And I suspect it's not always bad. Sometimes you need a confident man to run your country. But
that's a good observation.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's very tempting, especially for somebody in this position with a new dynasty, and all of a sudden, he is offered the same kind of ritual that his predecessor was, to be worshipped, at least for 30 days. So anybody that doesn't will be cast into the den of lions. This was attractive to him. Now, O king, establish the interdict and sign the document, so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no longer the Babylonians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and interdict. He fell for it. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house, where he had windows in the upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. And he got down upon his knees 3 times a day, and he prayed and gave thanks before his Elohim as he had done previously. Put yourself in that position. What if the liberal government was able to take all power? It doesn't look so much like they're going to be able to right now. But should they, with their ideas about mandating, they don't give a person's religious feelings any kind of credit at all. No exemptions for religion. There are exemptions for other things, but none for religion. Why? Because they're not religious people, and in their hearts, they hate people of faith. I've seen people on our site there to say, I hate religion. I'm not religious. You can't follow Yahweh unless you're religious, because religion has to do, in definition, with the disciplines you keep. If you are against religion, but are for Yahweh, you're in a very strange place. Yahweh is not going to respond to a person who cares nothing for the discipline, say religion, that he has given us to follow. So Daniel, he has no intention on doing that. Who shall we follow? Elohim or man? But he goes to a secret place and breaks the decree. I'm thinking, was that place so secret? I mean, there were windows that he could look right into. It was upper chamber. He was looking toward Jerusalem. He was doing religious things. 11. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and supplication before his Elohim. He's being spied on. There is a Steele dossier. Then they came to hear and said before the king concerning the interdict, O king, did you not sign an interdict that any man who makes petition to any Elohim or man within 30 days, except to you, O king, Darius the Mede, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answers, the thing stands fast, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked. Those satraps, they have brainwashed him, where he says the very same thing in regards to the revoking of this decree, as they said before, as they suggested. Now he's saying it. Then they answered before the king that Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Yehuda, pays no heed to you, O king, or the interdict you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. And he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Man, Daniel had favor with Darius the Mede. Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and Persians that no interdict or ordinance which the king establishes can be changed. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king said to Daniel, may your Elohim, whom you serve continually, deliver you. In a way, that's a prayer. That is a prayer. The king, distressed as he was, breaks his own law. He prays to one other than himself. He had an empire to run. What to do if the guy who's planning to make his prime minister was only out because of a stupid decree he himself had made at the behest of lesser luminaries. 17, and a stone was brought and laid upon the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Now look, to see the next step in this whole process, we have to go to Daniel 14. If you have a Bible, perhaps you'll tell me, what page is Daniel 14 on?
That's a real good question.
Didn't you think that Daniel had only 12 chapters?
Oh, this is interesting. Like the book of Acts, right?
And the 29th chapter?
Right.
We talked earlier about Daniel being in 3.
Oh, okay, yeah, the bell. This is Bel and the Dragon.
Same chapter. Do you have that in your Bible?
Yeah.
Okay. That's where we have to take this up. We don't have any other information, but the Greek Daniel, that last 2 chapters are stories about Daniel that were written originally in Greek. And the writer of that section takes up his parable from then on till since Darius could not get any sleep. Now, Daniel was there for 6 days. This is in 1431. There were 7 lions in the den. And I love this part here. It really demonstrates the power and care of Elohim. And every day they had been given 2 human bodies and 2 sheep. But these were not given to them now, so they might devour Daniel. Listen, verse 33. Now the prophet Habakkuk was in Yehuda. He had boiled pottage and had broken bread into a bowl and was going into the field to take it to the reapers. Where is he? He's in Judea. Daniel's not in Judea. Daniel's a long way away from there, someplace over in Medea. But the angel of Yahweh said to Habakkuk, take the dinner which you have to Babylon, to Daniel in the lion's den. Habakkuk said, sir, I've never seen Babylon, and I know nothing about the den. Then the angel of Yahweh took him by the crown of his head and lifted him by his hair and set him down in Babylon, right over the den, with the rushing sound of the wind itself. Imagine that. I don't know about you, but have you ever experienced supernatural transportation from one place to a remote other place?
No.
I've had that 2 times. And one time anyway, I was going to Full Gospel Businessmen's gathering in Indianapolis with Reverend R.W. Shambach. He was in that night. Soon before he died, I want to go hear Shammy. And I went with the organist. I was a pianist. The other guy was the organist for the Assembly of God at that time. And we lived about an hour and a half away. And we were coming up from the south into Indianapolis. And all of a sudden, we found ourselves seeing a sign along the side of the road that said Greensburg, 50 miles. We both looked at each other. We've been keeping track of where we were. And we turned around. What are we doing over here? We were just here south. Now we're over here east, just that fast. Now, I don't know if it was really a transportation, but it really seemed like it at the time. And my friend, he was a timid young man, and he said, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. They'll be talking about it. They'll be talking about us. I said, I want to tell everybody I can. Why? Because we later found out that on our route from the south to Indianapolis to Shambach was in the Masons Hall, huge place there, full of idols, that there was a gigantic wreck right through the place that we would have had to be. And we could have well been killed, because we tried to find a reason why Elohim would send an angel and pick us up by the roof of our car and move us somewhere else. So we assumed that we were saved from that wreck in the middle of all the interstate coming together in Indianapolis, and we turned around and went back and made it to the Mason Hall on time.
Wow.
A lot of people I've heard have had experiences like that, but look at Habakkuk. He's fixing dinner for these workers, and all of a sudden he says no to the mission because, look, Babylon was hundreds, even 1,000 miles away, and his pottage would never last that long. Then all of a sudden he's taken up, and as he's hanging over there, over the lion's den, Daniel, take the dinner which Elohim has sent you. And Daniel said, thou hast remembered me, O Elohim, and hast not forsaken those who love thee. He never even thanked Habakkuk. And it says that Daniel arose and ate, and the angel of Elohim immediately returned Habakkuk to his own place. Immediately, I can just see Habakkuk going back and saying to himself, well, that Daniel, he's not such hot stuff. He never even said thank you. On the seventh day, the king came to mourn Daniel. And it's at that point that we leave the Greek version of the lion's den and come back to Daniel 6 and 19.
Can I make a comment to that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's very interesting. Of course, it says in verse 40. And on the seventh day, the king came to lament over Daniel. Now, whether that was the seventh day of the week, we don't really know, correct? Because it doesn't say, because we don't have the Hebrew of that, or do we?
Well, we know the 7 days in prophetic or apocalyptic terms means a fullness of time. It could be literally 7 days, but you notice how they pop 7 in to a lot of apocalyptic literature and use it as a time measure. It means the completeness of time, the right time.
Right. It also means to swear, right? Because to seven somebody is to swear to something. I've heard that.
I haven't heard that, but
really?
Certainly could be the case. Shiva.
And the only reason why I was bringing this out is because recognizing the meaning of Shabbat, it seems like that would because Shabbat is the deliverance of the people from their enemies and the destruction of the enemy. And so here we have both of those happening on this seventh day of Daniel's time in the den, which is kind of interesting. But
yeah.
But I just want to make one other comment, and then I'll let you go back to Daniel 6. But it says up here in Daniel, what is that, verse 31? It says, and there he stayed in the lion's den for 6 days. So we can only assume that he had no food and no water. That just struck me because at the very present time, I've been doing some research on a dry fasting protocol, which is 7 days, no food, no water.
Really?
Yeah. And it's, and just to make a note about it, when you put nothing in your mouth, not even water, it shuts down your digestive system and your whole system goes into a totally different metabolic process. And your body, after the second day, onto the third day, your body will no longer consume muscle. It is only going to consume senescent and degraded cells like tumors, cysts, things like that.
Adipose fat
and fat. Right. So you're basically subsisting on the fat and old protein. But you will from the end of day 2 through day 7, you're going to retain all your muscle. So it's a pretty incredible thing. So here it is, Daniel, and I mean I could talk for an hour on this stuff, but just to say that this is the most incredible fast that I've been studying about. So maybe someday I could talk about some of that. But anyway, I just see that's just very significant. He was there for 6 days. No food, no water.
Why not? I only have 15 more minutes to go. Why don't we talk about that if you feel in the spirit of doing it?
Well, no, I didn't want to abdicate what you're doing because you're taking us back to Daniel 6, right?
Yes, I am, but I only have 15 more minutes. Next
time it's not enough time.
We get into the visions. I have tried to keep this to an hour 10. But this is something we're interested in, and I might say that thing with the Hebrew pictographs, people are very interested in that subject, evidently, because you've got just in a day or in the little bit of time it's been up there, it's got 100 downloads, which doesn't give you an idea how many people have hit that thing. But, in the next several years, there's going to be a lot of
That's cool
on that.
Well, very cool.
Yeah. Well, we'd like to learn that. And so I think anytime you're talking about diet, especially primitive diet, you're going to get a great deal of interest in those things.
Well, yeah, and because one of the things that I've heard before, you might recall, what was it, about 15, 20 years ago, Zeitgeist was popular. Do you remember that?
I know the word.
And it was a parody essentially against Christianity. And it was based on, maybe parody is not the right word, but they had done their own research, and some of it was legit, but they were tying in other things that were quasi research. They didn't do their due diligence on some of the stuff. So they were just sewing together a narrative that, was to the casual observer trashing Christianity. And it was very well done. It was reasonably organized. And one of the things they brought out is that the scroll of the dead, had their own 10 commandments, out of Egypt.
Yeah.
And that predated Moses. Well, in light of what you just mentioned, the fact that, maybe Abraham and certainly Joseph had some influence on the court of Egypt prior to Moses, a couple of hundred years or more. And so recognizing just in that one photograph on that one slide that I had, the parallel between some of the pictographic Hebrew and some of those same letters in Egypt, you can't say that there couldn't have been some influence in the part of Joseph before the Moses. So, and Joseph understood the 10 commandments. I believe Abraham did. Otherwise, he couldn't really be the father of the covenant. Well, anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
It is. We understand that in the reign of either Akhenaten or his father, that Joseph and Jacob were there. And this third temple, so-called, the temple of Ezekiel and the one that's in the temple scroll, it is literally exactly the same as the Amarna temple. That is the temple ruins, including the storage bins.
Oh, yeah.
As Amarna, the Akhenaten temple, which, it is so huge that for the first time, everybody could go to church. Everybody. 50,000 people could go there. It is a huge temple complex. And finding that and seeing that it is the same dimensions as what is described in Ezekiel, we're thinking this is not a third temple, and nowhere is it mentioned that it's in Jerusalem anyway. We're thinking that they're looking back from Ezekiel to an earlier time in that temple of Akhenaten.
So, and these are based on measurements from the ruins down there, you're saying?
Yes. If somebody's interested in that, I've got that on jspresents.org or on YouTube. You can find it there. It's a very
YouTube1.org.
You can find it
YouTube
there.
One? Yeah.
There's another one, jspresents.org, where I just have the Hebrew Nation radio version without the video. I think I have just about everything up there now. And there's a whole series on this particular kind of thing. And a lot of it is done by Allison
Gray?
Gary.
Or Gary.
Yeah, Allison Gary. Okay, well, we'll go back here and, when my 10 minutes is up, let's talk about the diet.
Oh, well, when your time's up, sure.
Yeah, it's almost up. You can tell something's wrong with my voice tonight. They just kind of crapped out on me.
You're sounding all right. My voice gets kind of scratchy. You know what the thing is? When I get that that frog in my throat, Jackson?
Yes.
That's the Wi-Fi.
Really?
I don't normally have the Wi-Fi on that early in the week, and so when I turned it on, because we don't have Ethernet here, but we only use the Wi-Fi. We shut it off when we're not using the computer, and so I think that's what's going on with that, because I don't normally have that problem. But anyway.
So it's a microwave problem?
Yeah, well, a wave that's might be close to that could be.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
We're going back to Daniel 6:19 to finish this up. Then, at break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. When he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish and said to Daniel, "Oh, Daniel, servant of the living Elohim, has your Elohim, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My Elohim sent an angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not hurt me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I have done no wrong." 23. Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den of the lions. So Daniel was taken up, and no kind of hurt was found upon him, because he had trusted in his Elohim. I suspect, if there's truth to this story, that is a mighty strong trust. And the king commanded, and those men who had accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions. They, their children, their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth: "Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion men tremble and fear before the Elohim of David," Daniel, "for he is the living Elohim, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall not end." Well, in this way, too, the king Darius disobeys his own commandment, but there's nobody to accuse him anymore. They've all been eaten up, their bones beaten to pieces for the morrow. And he goes on to speak of Elohim in these words: "He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in sky and land. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions." So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Now, you know about Cyrus. Cyrus is mentioned in the prophets as an anointed one, as a type of Messiah. So these Persian and Median rulers, if we can take the context of what Daniel is saying here, their entire religious discipline can be changed through seeing a sign and a wonder. A sign and a wonder. I wonder if that would change anything in our country. There are so many signs and wonders here. We can't help but encounter them every week of our lives. So to finish up here, what is the lesson that the apocalypticist is giving the 2nd century BC Jews, using the tales, the mythology, the legends from 500, 400 years hence before. One thing that is definitely there is divine retribution. Elohim will get you for that. Vengeance is mine. I will repay. One of the great hopes we still have today as an apocalyptic style people is that sinners, if they cannot be converted, will be taken from the face of the earth during the day of judgment, which is the same as the millennium. So there'll be no more breaking of law. And if there's no more breaking of Torah, there can be no more crime either. Second, a commitment to prayer. And here, the Essenes picked up the same thing in the Didache, 3 formal times a day. If you have no desire for a relationship with Elohim, why would Elohim care about you? Well, he still would, but in the human sense of care, probably not. It reminds me of an episode with my father. He gave a homeless relative a house. Yeah, a whole house. And one that we had previously lived in. So it was a good house. Did he get any thanks for that? No. What the new owner did, again, a relative, gave him a harangue about how shitty that house was. And couldn't Big Jack have given him a better one? Well, Big Jack, he was not rich by any means. That was something about the ability to give to others in a sacrificial manner. Should you expect even thanks? Should you expect anything back? Better off not to expect. This is why the Torah talks about not lending money, but giving money so you can take the worry and onus off yourself. I'm sure that Elohim gets a lot of complaints. And some have said regarding the Psalms that complaint is a high form of praise. Maybe so. Look at Habakkuk himself. His whole first couple chapters is about complaints. And the 3rd chapter of Habakkuk is an add-on from another author, that where Elohim comes in and tells him about how small he is in the scheme of things. Elohim gets a lot of complaints. Thirdly, Daniel is trying to tell 2nd century Jews in Israel, as El saved the Hebrew children from the decree of Babylon, from the decree of Darius, through a miracle of his angel, he could and would do the same for Jews under the little horn, Antiochus Epiphanes, God manifest. Who was the king whom they were suffering from? King of the Seleucid Empire. It's no accident that the lessons and stories of Daniel were addressing the plight of Daniel's descendants 300, 400, even 500 years later. This Daniel, writing in the 2nd century as Daniel, is giving hope to all these Jews, those siding with the Maccabees and those not siding with them. Because Daniel is pretty obviously not seeing the Maccabees as heroes, because when he speaks to them, he said that only a little help came. He's giving all the glory to Elohim. And as I said, this could even be called a Jewish civil war, because hardly everybody was in favor of the Maccabees, especially when the Maccabees took up the high priesthood into their own family, which was illegal. Their enslavement to godless emperors wouldn't be forever, but that Elohim's reign would be forever. And to end the section of the stories and recount the latter day Daniel's advice to the Jews of his time, while such great pressure was on to forget their righteous ways and customs, remember the Seleucids took away circumcision, took away the food laws, took away the laws of modesty with gymnasiums and baths. They should sacrifice if they needed to keep the food ordinances, keep from worshiping men and idols at all costs, remembering that pagan kings were always fickle, unpredictable, and insane. And might we say, victims of Alzheimer's disease, as Antiochus Epiphanes was, that Elohim would send a prophet or an angel or the man or woman of God to encourage them and save them, that Elohim was in the process of making a way. And they would see that day, and they saw that day in 164 BC within a time, times, and half of time that Daniel is writing, when Antiochus, who declared himself Elohim manifest, fell out of his chariot and was eaten with worms in Parthia, the old kingdom of Media. And we pray, Father Yahweh, let these same promises become true in our day. We hardly sacrifice. We hardly have to do anything, yet we can see on the horizon persecution coming. And as one prophet has said, a latter-day prophet, what we need is a good persecution. We don't ask for persecution, but if it come, for you to sort out the kadosh from the unrighteous, let us maintain the same kind of courage and resolve as Daniel and the 3 Hebrew children. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, I'm not too far over. Why don't you tell us a little about this diet? I'm sure Ann and I would be interested.
Okay.
If she's still there.
Yeah, thanks for your word on that. So I just wanted to ask you a question, though. So in Daniel 14, it talks about the 6 days he was in the den, but in Daniel 6, it appears that he was only in there for about 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any insight you have on that, or?
It's a difference, the way they're reading or their source documents are different. If they use source documents, because you've got 2 different hands.
2 different hands?
2 different hands in the manuscript.
Oh, yeah.
3 different languages. So.
Right, okay. 3 different languages. So there was what, Chaldee, Aramaic, and Hebrew?
Chaldee, that's Babylonian, South Babylon. Ur of the Chaldees is where Abraham started out with, and that means the source of demons. Chaldee is another word for demons, but I don't think that the last 2 chapters, the Greek chapters of Daniel, were initially put onto the end of the Hebrew and Aramaic. I think they were under separate cover that became to be. And of course, when the Jews put together their canon about 90 AD, they took off any text that was in the Greek language, and there went the entire Apocrypha, and there went the last 2 chapters of Daniel as well. Not going to have anything.
Okay.
Apocalypses. They were
that kind of makes sense.
Dead set against apocalyptic writing. So it's surprising that they even left Daniel in there at all.
Well, I understand Daniel was missing from the Old Testament for years, and it wasn't until, when was that? Was it around the time of the Maccabees that they put it back in? Something like that.
Have you heard about that? Later.
Oh, yeah.
That book had to have time to circulate. And I would say, because that particular text and all apocalypses are so popular with the people, that there was probably intense pressure for the rabbinate in 90 AD to put that in there. I'm pretty sure they didn't want it in there. But there's another text that is only in Ge'ez language that is very similar to that, which we'll look at next week. And that is the similitudes of Enoch. Because here in the visions, we get named an Ancient of Days and a Son of Man. What do those terms mean? The only place we can find out what those terms mean is in something of a companion apocalypse, and that is what we call First Enoch, which is made up of 5, or in some cases 6 different books packed together. Now that's going to be interesting, I hope.
Wow. Well, I was kind of struck with, it's been a while since I've read chapter 6 of Daniel, but I was kind of struck with the fact that that Darius said that sleep eluded him, and he spent the night in fasting and refused to receive any of his concubines. And so obviously he was petitioning an entity greater than himself, it seems to me. And then, at the end of that chapter, when he says, he makes a decree that Yahweh is the living God who endures forever. His sovereignty will never be destroyed. He makes all these comments. I'm sure that Daniel had shared with him some of these elements. I was just, at first I was wondering if he was praying to the God of Yahweh, Daniel's God, in that night. Do you have any insight on that, or just
maybe? Maybe. Look,
because I find it interesting because Daniel was a eunuch, and so here's Darius who refused to have women on this night, and Daniel's problem. Anyway, that's kind of an interesting thing there.
Yes. Look what happened to Koresh, Cyrus.
Okay, yeah, David Koresh. That's right. It's the word Koresh.
Yeah. Well, that's pronounced Kiris.
Kirish? Okay.
Kiris in the original language. Now, look, there's no doubt. It's a historical fact, I would say, denied by probably very liberal people or minimalists, that it's no doubt that Kiris let these people go, sent them back with his help to Jerusalem, sent back Nehemiah. Kiris is called an anointed one, a Messiah, sent them back with all kinds of accoutrements to rebuild, and we might say troops as well, because there was a lot of division there. I can't see how the successor to Darius would have those kind of feelings had he not in great measure converted, even if it was secret conversion. So I'm thinking Darius, I don't know right now whether there was any blood relationship between the two, probably was. And it seems
could be a marriage, but
yeah, religious change over a nation seldom comes in the first generation. it will often come in a second generation or a second term of a king or a believer. And I'm thinking that maybe, in fact, we ought to just take a look here and see whether the two were related. I like to say one is the son or grandson of the other. Was Cyrus related to Darius? Now, why don't we know that? We should know it.
Well, one was a Mede, the other one was Persian. Darius was the Mede.
Yeah, that was those two, Persians and Medes, were kind of the same people with some split in the background, but they worked together. Of course, Darius was a member of the royal bodyguard of Cambyses, the son and heir of Cyrus the Great, who ruled several years before dying mysteriously in 522. Well,
he was an older man. I understand he was an older man, and that's why Cyrus had chosen to set him up as king first. Is that not true?
Say that again.
Yeah, no. My understanding, I don't know where I heard this, but that because Darius was the older man, that Cyrus had set him up to be king, knowing that he may only reign for a few years, maybe, and then took over. Well, and another thing that I find interesting in this, if you look at Daniel chapter 9, if you go back to the Hebrew, looking at Daniel chapter 9, Daniel does not use the name Yahweh at all in the first 8 chapters, and it's not until Darius becomes king, and the Babylonian kingship has been done away with. All of a sudden, under Darius, Daniel uses the name Yahweh 7 times in chapter 9, and that's the only time he uses the name Yahweh. And so when Cyrus becomes king, which I'm assuming is the latter portion of the book of Daniel, you don't find Yahweh again. So I'm assuming that he did not want him to use the name, whereas because of the statement that Darius had stated after the lion's den incident, that he had no problem with Daniel using Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Wah-Heh, whatever. But so I think there's a difference there between the two.
Yes, well, I'm looking at some answers on Quora about this. And there are several answers to the question, are they related or are they the same person? But I guess the answer most closest to what we're talking about when the question is asked, were Cyrus and Darius the same? The answer from Dick Hartfield is no. The reason for the confusion is that history tells us that King Cyrus defeated the Babylonian Empire and that Darius the Mede was one of his successors. But the book of Daniel says that it was Darius the Mede who defeated the Babylonians. You all right there? I'm going to try that again.
Yeah, they put their mic on mute.
Yeah, okay. The reason for the confusion is that history tells us that King Cyrus defeated the Babylonian Empire and that Darius the Mede was one of his successors. But the book of Daniel says that it was Darius the Mede who defeated the Babylonians, Daniel 5:31, and that Cyrus was his successor. The book of Daniel contains several historical errors, as a result of having been compiled centuries after the period in which it was sent. Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, see, Kyrus was, because he was younger, he was the one that went about maintaining the new empire, where Darius was the figurehead and overseeing the home fires, so to speak. That's kind of the impression that I got from years ago in the study on that, whatever that is worth.
Mm-hmm. We should be able to find out much more about such things as that. But certainly Darius was first. He conquered the Babylonian Empire, then Kyrus came after him. How far after? It looks like from these answers that he was next in line. I'll check that out before next time. And who's King Xerxes?
Isn't that art? Is it Artaxerxes? Isn't that the same thing? No?
I think so. There's one guy in fables and nursery rhymes, Xerxes, King Xerxes. And there's Artaxerxes, but I think he's packed in there someplace. Let's see, we had somebody come in here. Harold's Fire, Steve McGuire. They rhyme. Good for you guys. Good to see you here. We're just finishing up. And I think we're going to get Dr. Lokchi to give us just a little more information on this 6-day, 7-day diet.
Yeah, so the distinction being, we think of a fast or a water fast. Anytime someone says the word fast, the distinction needs to be made, because typically when someone says fast, you think no food, but only taking water. But a true fast, not taking water or food, is called a dry fast. And the way that works is, and just for the other two, Harold's Fire and McGuire there, you guys didn't catch this, but we were just reading in Daniel 14, which was Bel and the dragon. In that account mentioned that Daniel was in the lion's den for 6 days, and there's no mention of any food or water. So that's what got me to bring that up, because I've been kind of researching this dry fast stuff. But so let me talk a little bit about that. So recognizing, we've all been told, well, you can't live more than 3 days without water. Well, that's not really true. But this particular protocol of dry fasting does talk about where you 2 times a day, you can either take a tepid or warm shower, or do a tepid warm bath. Come the 3rd day specifically, your skin just becomes a sieve, and you just start sucking the water up whether you're using the shower or the tub. And of course, if you're living in an area that has municipal water, you want to have some kind of filter where you don't have all that chlorine going on. But so a shower filter or in-home filter, to get the most of the chlorine out and the relateds. But anyway, and then the other one is doing retention enemas of water. And so the whole point is you allow nothing to go into your mouth. As soon as you even try to rinse your mouth out, if you can imagine going so many days without having anything enter your mouth, your tongue's going to get kind of like leather, right? But even so, so they recommend, talk to a minimum. They recommend using some kind of sock mechanism or something to keep your mouth closed, so you don't, breathe with your mouth open at night. And so I'm going to be, because I'm going to do this thing. I've been researching it for a while, and I've actually had a couple of patients do it. I don't normally recommend any kind of protocol, unless I've gone through it myself. This has been an exception. I will say that it takes at least 5, you know, someone has, because I basically what happened is I had a patient who she tested for nematodes, which is a type of parasite, and she was loaded with them, and so she tested for, yeah, and so she tested for and this was from the muscle testing that I was able to determine this, and so, you know, I determined a nutritional protocol for her, and I said, you know, this is going to take, basically you're going to kill them, their spores or their eggs are impervious to the nutrition that you're going to be taking, and so it basically takes, you know, you take the stuff for a period of time, then you go off it for a period of time. The eggs can sense whether the stuff is in the intestines or not, and then when they see that it's gone, then they come out of their eggs and they hatch and all this kind of stuff, and then you hit them again. So basically, there's a routine where you take the supplement for a period of time, so many days off, then supplement again, so many days off. It takes 4 generations to knock them out. So that's like 2 months or more. And so she says, is there any other way of doing this quicker? And I said, well, there's one, but I don't know a lot about it. But so anyway, so I told her about the 7-day dry fast. I said, in order to get rid of those nematodes, you have to go at least 5 days. And so she was just like right on it. She says, man, I want to do it. And I said, I really recommend you get the book before you actually do this thing. She didn't. She's a AAA personality kind of person. Friend of mine, actually. She's a 364 person that I got acquainted with. Anyway, so she lives in Portland, which is about 5 hours from here, or just outside of Portland. Anyway, so she decided to do it. I kept in touch with her via text, and anyway, she did really well. And she had a lot of things going on, a lot of problems, chronic problems. And she was like, she's only 50 years old, and she's normally a very good eater, but she just got infested with these nematodes. And sure enough, she filled the toilet with these nematodes on day 5. Because if you want to get rid of parasites, you have to go at least 5 days. So she did the recommendations that I mentioned to her over the phone. Anyways, and when I saw her about a month later, oh my word, she looked so awesome. She looked great, man. She was just the picture of health. Absolutely. It was just incredible. Anyway, so I've been adding a few things to this particular protocol that I've been kind of digesting here, if I can use that pun. It's called the Phoenix. I don't like the title all that much, but it's called the Phoenix Protocol. It's called Dry Fasting for Rapid Healing and Radical Life Extension. It's written by August Dunning, who used to work for NASA. Reasonably well done. It's a small book. It's only $15. You can get it on Amazon or any other book place. And so I'm working on, he doesn't go into a lot of detail on the pre-fast, because you want to take a week in prepping yourself, nor the post. It takes about 3 weeks to recover after the dry fast to get your body up. Now, and so his whole point behind the Phoenix Protocol, and this is the clincher, this is what makes it all worth it, especially for somebody, you know, if they're not really concerned about parasites, if all they're concerned is about maybe some subclinical or maybe, marginal chronic issues that they have, you can eliminate a lot of this stuff just by doing this. But yeah, aren't those lovely pictures?
Well, it's worthwhile to just show them, because something that's even worse than this is trichinosis.
Oh yeah, the unclean worm.
to think that she would fill a toilet with them after 5 days.
Well, when I say, in other words, she covered the surface water of the toilet with those things. Oh. Is what she told me. Yeah. So what was now, and then what I was going to mention about now, August Dunning, who I've had some contact via email. He's a very approachable guy. This is the number one way to kickstart your stem cell system in every organ of your body. Every organ of your body. But he has developed, along with two other Russian doctors. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. One is a Russian doctor. The other one was Serbian or something. They've done the research to show on a cellular level how this is actually working in reawaken. Not only you're detoxing your body in such a way that you minimize the Herxheimer type reactions, but getting these stem cells, some people, you can go to Europe and spend 2 or 3 weeks at some resort and spend $25,000 for stem cell therapy.
Yeah.
When you could do this program, and it probably has less risk, believe it or not, and is a heck of a lot cheaper. Anyway, so for those of you, in consideration, I mean, this would also be a very spiritual journey, because think about pre-fast, fast, and then post-fast. Boy, if you kept a journal and did this for spiritual reasons also, I mean, that would be an awesome thing. Steve says, I probably need to do this. Yeah. So if you guys got that information, I'll mention the title of that book. And again, it's not necessarily a Christian thing per se, but he does a reasonable job giving somewhat of a layman's approach to the mechanism on how this actually works at a cellular level, and the rationale behind the different supplements, both pre-fast and post-fast. But so it's the Phoenix Protocol, Dry Fast for Rapid Healing and Radical Life Extension by August Dunning, Dunning. $15.
DUNN?
Yeah, ING, that's right.
I'm trying to look it up here on the net here. Maybe we could get...
Oh, pull a picture up?
We could get at least a link here. The Phoenix Protocol, Dry Fasting for Rapid Healing and Radical Something. Yeah, that's the book, all right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got an interesting cover.
Yeah, it sure does. But how do you get by for 6 or 7 days without any water?
Yeah, so what happens, see, your skin will absorb the water if you stay in the tub, and also if you do a retention enema. Your body, this is the beauty of it, is because it's not going through the initial stages of digestion. See, anytime you put anything in your mouth, actually stimulates a cascade of hormonal action in your body to set up a digestive process, prepping the liver, prepping the small intestine, conditioning the stomach, all this stuff. There's timing involved. And so as soon as food goes in your mouth, this process starts. And so I had another friend, he was the one that turned me on to this whole concept and mentioned the book to me. He had done it for 7 days. And he said, he decided he was just going to put a little bit of water in his mouth just to rinse it out. Because, you like I said, you can imagine that especially when you're detoxing, your mouth would probably be like a New York subway or something.
Right.
But, and so he went to go rinse his mouth out. Oh man, he said it was the worst thing he ever did. He says within a half an hour, his stomach was just wrenching. He was almost bowled over in a fetal position. Took him a day and a half to recover from just doing that. And he continued going through it, but anyhow, and he was doing it for a diabetes issue, and I remember, because he's over in Idaho and I hadn't seen him in months, and so when I went over there to his wedding, and oh my gosh, he looked a lot better. Really? It had been it'd been a little over a month since he had done his fast when I saw him.
So he got sick just because he rinsed his mouth out?
Just because he rinsed his mouth out. So, now well, this is recorded. I'm not sure I want to share this stuff, but I've got more stuff. See, I'm adding another protocol to this, which is going to make this a lot easier. I'm kind of surprised that Dunning doesn't bring this out, but there's another component to this that should make this easier. And but I can't really speak to it. I basically need to go through it and work with it before I can really talk about it.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, I know that you'll spill the beans someday, and probably pretty soon.
Well, like I said, I'm looking to do this next month myself. I'm just finalizing my research. I've got one other client in Ohio who's all excited. She wants to do it, and she just devoured the book. And I told her, I said, I'm working on an additional program, and I'm in the midst of it right now. Mm-hmm. And so I want to get that done before the end of this week and get that to her. And then like I said, I'm going to be going through it probably the same time she is. And then once I go through all that stuff, maybe sometime in February, I could maybe talk about some of that.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this seems, according to the reviews and the description, to bring hope to a lot of people suffering from terminal illnesses. I would sure like to talk to some people or hear from people that have actually done it. And you're going to try it in February?
No, I'm gonna go. It's like I said, it's a total of 5 weeks, because you have your 1 week prep, your 1 week dry fast, and then you have 3 weeks to recover.
Okay.
Now, when I say recover, in other words, obviously the first week after the dry fast is a sort of a somewhat regimented approach to food. And then you gradually add more things into that next week, and into the third week, you're almost back to, and basically, and you'd want to eat more of a healthy diet, obviously, if indeed we've been, partaking of something that we shouldn't have prior to that, making it a habit. But anyhow, yeah, sometime I'm hoping to go through that in January, and hope to live to tell about it in February.
For sure. Does this mean you don't end the fast up at the Chinese buffet?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I don't think so.
I did a 20-day fast.
Oh, yeah?
And yes, I did years ago. And I ended it up at a Chinese buffet with a 32-ounce Pepsi.
Oh, no.
I can't tell you how sick I got.
I bet.
So stupid.
Uh-huh. Well, it's really interesting how that is. You do a few days fasting, and your body is just craving the worst stuff imaginable.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of discipline to do a fast. So yeah, it's kind of tough. Oh, so Steve made a comment. So can we skip the enema? He mentions in here you don't have to do the enemas. But if you get hungry, he says, if you happen to get hungry, an enema will take your hunger pains away really quick.
I can see it.
Yeah.
I can see that. Okay,
yeah.
We're going to do this in January. Next month?
Yeah.
That's far out.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, get rid of the bags under my eyes, because I know I have parasites myself, so I need to take care of it.
I think everybody does.
Yeah, most people do. Most people.
All right, everybody. I thank you so much for coming, and we'll get this out on the web pretty soon to youtube1.org. And if you know other people that are interested in these topics, let them know. Thank you for coming.
Mm-hmm.
See you Shabbat.
All right.